Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order.
The clerk will report the amendment. Point of order has been reserved.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1808, offered by Mr. Johnson of Louisiana, page 18, line 12.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer a very common sense amendment that I don't think anyone here should object to. The amendment would simply include employees at pregnancy care centers among those exempt from the restrictions in the bill. Now look, here's the logic behind it, and I dare anybody to challenge me on this. There have been more than 50 instances of attacks on pro-life organizations since the majority opinion in the Dobbs case was leaked in May. That's just in the last 11 weeks, 50. Let me give you a short list of some examples. May 5th, 2022, Portland, Oregon. Vandals smashed numerous windows and spray-painted graffiti on the Southeast Portland Pregnancy Resource Center. May 13th, activists left threatening messages on the front of the Alpha Pregnancy Center in Reisterstown, Maryland, including the messages, "If abortions aren't safe, neither are you. You're anti-choice, not pro-life, not a clinic," etc. May 18th, vandals targeted a women's faith-based medical clinic in Auburn, Alabama, defacing the clinic sign and staff members' vehicles. May 25th, Linwood, Washington. Anti-life activists smashed windows and vandalized the Next Step Pregnancy Center with the threat, "If abortion isn't safe, you aren't either." June 6th, Asheville, North Carolina. Vandals broke windows and left graffiti on the Mountain Area Pregnancy Center Services building, including messages, "If abortions aren't safe, neither are you," "No forced abortion," and an anarchist symbol. June 7th, reports indicate that an abortion terrorist group, Jane's Revenge, this is from Public Reports, firebombed the Compass Care Pro-Life Pregnancy Center in Amherst, New York. June 25th, Longmont, Colorado, vandals graffitied and set fire to the Life Choices free pregnancy services. June 26th, Winter Haven, Florida. Anti-life activists destroyed security cameras and spray-painted the Life Choice Pregnancy Center with threatening messages including, "Your time is up, we're coming for you," Jane's Revenge. June 11th, activists vandalized the pro-life Women's New Life Clinic in Baton Rouge, Louisiana by spray-painting anti-life messages and Jane's Revenge on its exterior walls. I have many pages of this. I'll stop with that one because it's personal to me. The Women's New Life Clinic stands right next to the abortion provider in Baton Rouge, and the New Life Clinic has offered hope to countless women for years. I'm proud to call many of the leaders of that clinic friends, and they do not deserve the treatment they've endured, but they certainly deserve the support of the House of Representatives in condemning violence from the radical left, and at the very least, allowing them to protect themselves as they go to and from work. There are 2,700 care pregnancy centers in the United States. They serve over 2 million women in need a year. They're supported by over 10,000 medical professionals, and they do exceptional, important work. We've all said we want the safety nets for pregnant women and those in need, and these facilities provide a vital service. I used to be legal counsel for a number of these, so I'm speaking from personal experience. Here's my point on this amendment. It's very simple. If any group deserves to be excluded from the provisions of this bill, it is those who are facing real threats to their lives just for providing non-abortion pregnancy services to women. If Department of Education and other federal agency employees are excluded, then these folks certainly deserve to be. I support and hope that you all will support this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. The whole point of the bill, well, certainly, let me start off by saying, certainly no one condones violence at pregnancy resource centers. No one condones violence at abortion clinics. No one condones violence anyplace. But the whole point of the bill is that possession of these types of weapons by untrained forces, by forces who aren't military forces or law enforcement forces, will simply increase violence, will increase the danger to the people at the Pregnancy Resource Center and to anyone else around. So for that reason, I oppose the amendment. The bill forbids the possession of, or rather the new possession of these types of assault weapons for good reason, and it makes an exception for law enforcement agencies and other military type agencies. But beyond that, these untrained individuals at pregnancy resource centers or anyone else will just increase the chances of people getting killed. So I oppose the amendment. I yield back. Does anyone else seek to speak on the amendment? What purpose does Mr. Jordan seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I strongly support this amendment. I think the gentleman from Louisiana made the fundamental point is, this is now. This is as we speak.
Right.
50 facilities in 11 weeks. And as the gentleman points out, this all started after the leaked draft opinion, the Dobbs opinion that was leaked. I mean, these are, and the gentleman knows this because he represented these entities, but these are facilities where they help moms and expecting moms with clothes for children, with diapers, with formula, with food, with furniture for their apartments or homes. I mean, this is the Lord's work they're doing, and they have never seen anything like this, where in an 11-week time frame, 50 of these, along with some churches, have been systematically and for this sustained effort to target them simply because they're pro-life. And as the gentleman pointed out, if we can let bureaucrats at the Department of Education get an exemption, bureaucrats at the Department of Agriculture, but we're not going to let people who serve expecting mothers and mothers at centers that have been targeted systematically by the left 50 in 11 weeks, oh my goodness. This is as timely and as needed as any amendment could be. And I would yield additional time to the gentleman from Louisiana to talk more about his great amendment.
I thank you, the gentleman from Ohio. This is really outrageous, the opposition to this. The hubris of members of this committee to suggest that these people would not be able to defend themselves. Look, in these centers, you have some of the most vulnerable people in our population. You have, women sometimes in late stages of pregnancy. You have older ladies serving them, younger ladies there. They often don't have budgets for security measures. They don't have security guards outside these facilities. These are just peaceful, law-abiding citizens, and they should have the right to defend themselves. The last I checked, at least in the last 11 weeks, guys, maybe I'm missing some records, but I don't think there's any bureaucrats at the Department of Agriculture who have had any of their offices firebombed or threatened. I don't think anybody's after them, but good for them. Good for them. They can have these weapons for self-protection, but the most vulnerable can't. I mean, it's a slap in the face. Obviously we believe all this is unconstitutional anyway, but the idea that you should be able to pick and choose which among the American citizens get to defend themselves with these weapons is, to me, absolutely outrageous. And heaven forbid, and we better pray, heaven forbid something doesn't happen at one of these facilities. I yield to back to Mr. Jordan, to Mr. Bishop.
I thank the ranking member, and it does point out another aspect of this, because the Democrats said we're not confiscating anybody's weapons under this bill. We're going to leave the weapons that are outstanding. But Mr. Johnson's amendment points up how problematic that is. If you have someone who's never seen fit or been compelled by circumstances to feel it necessary to have a weapon for self-defense, but then that person comes under mortal threat, that's when someone, particularly, as Mr. Biggs has pointed out, didn't talk about a man or a woman, but someone who is slight of build, might want an AR-15 or a weapon like that in order to be able to handle it and defend themselves well. And that's the situation in which the Democrats seek to impose this ban. You want to take the people who are newly subject to a threat, in this case, pregnancy resource centers, for nothing that they have done, and in fact, they've done nothing but care for people, but those hostile to them have come out, or hostile to life, have decided to victimize them with threats of violence and violent acts. And so if at that unfortunate point, someone in one or more of those circumstances would want to provide for the defense of people who are coming to that center or the employees there by having available a firearm banned under this law, they're out of luck. 20 million, there are maybe 24 million modern sporting rifles in the United States, but someone who now needs one because of a mortal threat, the Democrats would bar from protecting. I yield back to the ranking member.
And under the language of the bill, if someone wants to give those women who were at that crisis pregnancy center one of the weapons banned under the legislation, if they don't go through an FFL, they're in trouble. They're criminals. So you got a situation that is timely, that is present, where they're threatening these and attacking these facilities. And if you want to help them, provide them a weapon, oh, you're going to be in big trouble if you do that.
Gentleman's time has expired. Who seeks recognition? Ms. Tiffany.
Representative Tiffany, move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Yeah, thank you. I rise to support the amendment that's before us because it really makes sense. And the gentleman that introduced this from Louisiana, he brought up one of the organizations that's clearly working across the country called Jane's Revenge, because I would add another one to the list, and that was the Wisconsin Family Action building in Madison, Wisconsin, that was bombed. And I don't know if they've fixed that building since, and there was graffiti all over it threatening heinous actions against those people at Wisconsin Family Action. And these people would like to be able to protect themselves. Think also about a witness we had last week, Ms. Foster. What did she say to us? She said for the first, I believe it was the first time, she had to have protection to come here because she is a very high-profile person at this point in defending life. Think about that. And I would just correct the record in regards to one thing. The chairman said, no one encourages violence. Well, it can be encouraged tacitly.
Did the gentleman yield?
I
I said no one condones, not encourages.
Terrific. So let's go back to 2 years ago, right about this time, when the vice presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, who is now the vice president of the United States, worked with organizations to help pay their bail. Pay the bail of those rioters in Minneapolis that did such enormous damage to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which I would say to you, I don't know if they're going to recover. If you're following the stories that are coming out of Minneapolis at this point, I don't know if that city is going to recover. Cops don't want to be there anymore. Crimes are not charged. We just saw an innocent woman have her apartment shot up, and a bunch of liberal activists showed up the next day and shouted her down when she said the police did the right thing. I mean, it's crazy out there. Yet the vice president of the United States said, we got to pay the bail of these people who are the rioters in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can say you don't condone, whatever the word you want to use, but this was certainly tacitly supporting what was going on there. It is out of control, and there's nothing that's being done. So why do you think citizens want to buy guns? Why do you think they want to protect themselves? Because they can't count on the police like in Minneapolis, Minnesota, because they've virtually been stopped from doing their jobs. Chicago, it's even worse. I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank Mr. Tiffany and ask for the committee be in order, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Johnson's amendment and the example it provides and why it particularly victimizes people who've not previously been provided for their own defense and need to, makes me mindful of this. We actually have, if you look at the numbers of the, for example, modern sporting rifles that are being banned here, there's a tremendous upsurge in interest in purchasing them. For example, annual total in 1990 of the additional purchases were 74,000. In 2020, there were 2.8 million. And also, if you look, it's interesting, the new predominance in terms of the increase in purchases, 58% increase in African Americans buying guns, 49% increase in Hispanic Americans buying guns, 43% increase in Asian Americans buying firearms. So before now, minorities were underrepresented in their ownership of guns. They've decided that they want to have them. And that's the time Democrats decided that they're going to stop letting people buy these weapons. How about that? Personal safety, tops the list of why people decide to buy a firearm. In 2021 Gallup survey, 88% of respondents said they own a gun for protection against crime, which is up from 67% in 2005. Recent immigrants to the United States. Many come from countries with high crime rates and have firsthand experience with underfunded police. It's like this, a recent immigrant said, it's, quote, "It's like for me to pursue my dreams, I need to make sure that I stay alive," Franco told Axios. That means making the most of the rights they may not have had in their home countries. So these are the people that the Democrats want to deny the opportunity now to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? For what purpose does Ms. Fishbach seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to comment a little bit. You know, there are violent acts and serious threats against these centers and against pro-lifers, and they really should be able to defend themselves. They should be able to get what they need to defend themselves, and I think it's almost comical to say that they wouldn't be trained. They will certainly be trained if they are going to be using those weapons. But I think in the end, I think absolutely what it boils down to is this bill takes away from everyone the ability to protect themselves in the way that they would, with the weapon that they would choose. And I think Mr. Johnson is just really trying to assist people that are under serious threat, a serious immediate threat. When there are things like that written on buildings that you work in, it is very, very scary. And I think that these people, that in particular with the centers, they deserve the ability to defend themselves. And I would yield time to Mr. Roy. It is.
I thank the gentlelady, and I would just note that there's a common theme here, and I think the gentleman from Louisiana is hitting on it, and we've had amendment after amendment where we're trying to help the people and the population of this country protect themselves from the lawlessness that is the direct result of the policies chosen by my Democratic colleagues to leave our cities vulnerable by defunding police, to leave our border communities vulnerable by absolutely refusing to secure the borders of the United States, to leave pregnancy centers vulnerable because they're being targeted by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and because you've got attacks that are being rooted out, often in places with defunded police where they don't have the ability to be secure. And we've got domestic violence cases. We have human trafficking cases, amendment after amendment, that have been completely ignored by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle because they don't care if the American people have to suffer in a lawless society while they are unarmed and able to defend themselves as guaranteed them in the Constitution of the United States. Specifically, in 2020, in Minneapolis, according to an article by David Bernstein with the Volokh Conspiracy, we have this story talking about what many Americans were dealing with. In Minneapolis, a city hit especially hard by the rioting in the summer of 2020, saw groups of armed residents protecting property and life from lawbreakers in the city's Lake Street neighborhood, which was at the heart of recent riots. Restaurateur Cecia Bares formed Security Latinos de la Lake, a group of gun-toting locals dedicated to protecting the area's Latino community. Bares' group was one of the many armed neighborhood watches that sprung up in the Twin Cities. "It's not something that I would want," he said, "but we were left alone. There were no cops that would come around. So what are we to do? Just stand there and do nothing?" The local NAACP chapter also organized groups of armed residents to guard local businesses during the summer's wave. In the city's predominantly black Falwell neighborhood, it became apparent that the police weren't available to help when protests and ransacking of businesses erupted. As a result, residents banded together to protect themselves, sitting outside businesses with guns to make sure outside groups did not attack. After several black-owned businesses were destroyed during demonstrations, City Councilman Jeremiah Ellison, son of Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, for the record, organized his own group of mostly black armed citizens. The group was formed to protect businesses in a neighborhood considered to be the heart of the city's black community. In one incident of armed self-defense during the rioting in Minneapolis, video footage shows armed volunteers standing outside a tobacco shop to help the store owners defend the premises against rioters and looters. One gun-toting volunteer explained that while we definitely don't agree with the looting, what we do agree with the cause for the protests. In other words, the peaceful protest versus the lawless looting of businesses owned by the community, and they wanted simply to defend themselves. And my colleagues then target AR-15s, saying in one breath that they're the most effective weapons of choice, and they want to deny the American citizens who want to defend their businesses, defend their pregnancy centers, defend their homes, defend themselves in the case of domestic violence, defend themselves in the case of wide open borders and dangerous cartels. And my colleagues want to deny them the Second Amendment right to have the most effective weapon to do so. That is what is actually on display here. The consequences of my Democratic colleagues breaking it, breaking our police, breaking our law enforcement, breaking the ability of the American people to defend themselves, and asking us to carry the result. That, I think, is what is at the heart of the amendment offered by my friend from Louisiana. He is right to offer it, and I support it, and I yield back.
Does the gentlelady yield back?
I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition? For what purpose does Mr. Roy seek recognition?
I would yield to my friend, Mr. Tiffany, if he wants time.
Okay, yeah, I'll take, I just want to put some concluding remarks in regards to Mr. Johnson's amendment, which is a good amendment and really is about people being able to protect themselves. I have to say to our friends on the other side, as you shoot down these amendments and you have a bill like this, I hope you fully understand you are the biggest gun salesman in America. You truly are. You go back to the Obama administration. You go back, you go to now with this committee that's advancing bills like this. People are going to protect themselves. And when they see the cops in retreat, which they are in city after city across America, people are going to protect themselves.
Will the gentleman yield?
And you heard the data. Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, that is because people in right-wing media, as well as you, as my Republican colleagues, have convinced people and to continue to propagate the myth that the federal government, the big scary government, is coming after people's guns. The legislation we are considering today, for example, as has been stated repeatedly in this hearing, in this markup, will not result in the taking away of any currently lawfully possessed weapon. But that is not what you will hear tonight on Tucker Carlson or any other show on the Republican side.
So thank you very much for that, that it's the right-wing media that's doing that. You clearly were not listening to Representative Roy and his description of what was going on in Minneapolis a couple of years ago, where people are saying we have to protect ourselves because the police are in retreat, including in the city that you live in the city that used to be safe 20 years ago when you had broken windows policing, which was the model for protecting citizens. And now look at where we're headed. City after city, record amounts of crime, prosecutors that won't prosecute,
Will the gentleman yield?
including the prosecutor in New York, in Manhattan, who will not prosecute. And you wonder why
Will the gentleman
people
yield?
want to. I will yield for 20 seconds.
Sir, it is well established that the vast majority of illegally possessed weapons in New York City come from states where there are very lax gun laws, including many of the states in the South and other places where Republican policies are in place, such as Georgia, for example, which Congresswoman Lucy McBath can tell you more about, and Texas, which Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia can tell you more about.
You can continue to live with that myth to make yourself feel better for the lawlessness that goes on in your city, but it's going on in cities across America, and it's because you have prosecutors that are weak and not doing their jobs. You have an FBI that's not doing their job as they used to. Look at the Parkland shooting. That's exactly what happened down there. Part of the failure was the FBI to act on actionable information that they had. Is someone else, Representative Roy?
Well, yeah, I would reclaim my time. I would note that with respect to whether or not my Democratic colleagues are coming after our guns, notwithstanding the specific language in this legislation, which of course would then ban future sales, which we know then where the dominoes fall. But I would note that I've got an article here where Mr. Mondaire Jones said, quote, semi-automatic weapons would qualify as assault weapons and they should be banned. quote, if the filibuster obstructs us, we will abolish it.
Will the gentleman yield?
If the Supreme Court objects, we will expand it, and we will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation, out of our communities. We will do whatever it takes, whatever it takes. That is the literal quote.
Will the gentleman
We'll do
yield?
whatever it takes. I'm going to yield back to the gentleman.
You know, I think back to a couple weeks ago when we were having these interminable debates in regards to this, which, by the way, you're selling guns as you have debates like this. The American people are paying attention when they said, look at all these red states that are, this is going on. Why is it going on? Because there's blue cities in those red states. All you got to do is look at Missouri. All you have to do is look at those areas where there is a blue city. That's where it's happening. I yield to the gentleman, back to the gentleman from Texas.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman. I appreciate the sentiment on this, and I yield back to the chair.
Gentleman yields back. Any further? In that case, the question occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Opposing.
Mr. Nadler.
No.
Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren. Ms. Jackson-Lee.
No.
Ms. Jackson-Lee votes no. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Johnson of Georgia.
No.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes no. Mr. Deutsch. Ms. Bass.
Ms. Bass? Not paying attention. Oh, Ms. Bass.
Mr. Jeffries.
Bass votes no.
Ms. Bass votes no. Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Jeffries votes no. Mr. Cicilline. Mr. Cicilline votes no. Mr. Swalwell. Mr. Liu.
No.
Mr. Liu votes no. Mr. Raskin. Ms. Jayapal. Ms. Stimmings.
No.
Ms. Stimmings votes no. Mr. Correa.
No.
Mr. Correa votes no. Ms. Scanlon.
No.
Ms. Scanlon votes no. Ms. Garcia.
Absolutely no.
Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Neguse. Ms. McBath. Ms. McBath votes no. Mr. Stanton.
No.
Mr. Stanton votes no. Ms. Dean.
Dean votes no.
Ms. Dean votes no. Ms. Escobar.
Also absolutely no.
Ms. Escobar votes no. Mr. Jones.
No.
Mr. Jones votes no. Ms. Ross.
No.
Ms. Ross votes no. Ms. Bush.
Bush votes no.
Ms. Bush votes no.
Mr. Chairman, how is Raskin reported?
Mr. Jordan. Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Shabbat.
Aye.
Mr. Shabbat votes aye. Mr. Gobert. Mr. Issa.
Congressman Issa,
Mr. Issa votes aye. Mr. Buck.
Absolutely aye.
Mr. Buck votes aye. Mr. Gates. Mr. Gates votes aye. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes aye. Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs votes aye. Mr. McClintock. Mr. McClintock votes aye. Mr. Stube?
Where are we now? Yes,
Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes aye. Mr. Massey? Aye. Mr. Massey votes aye. Mr. Roy? Aye. Mr. Roy votes aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop votes aye. Ms. Fishbach? Ms. Fishbach votes aye. Ms. Sparts? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes aye. Mr. Benz? Mr. Benz votes aye. Mr. Owens? Mr. Owens votes aye.
How is Swalwell recorded?
Mr. Neguse votes no.
Mr. Neguse votes no. Mr. Swalwell, you are not recorded.
No.
Mr. Swalwell votes no.
Ms. Lofgren?
Mr. Cohen votes no.
Mr. Cohen votes no.
Ms. Lofgren needs to unmute.
Ms. Jayapal votes no.
Deutsch votes no.
Mr. Deutsch votes no.
Ms. Lofgren?
Lofgren votes no.
Ms. Lofgren votes no.
Mr. Raskin?
No.
Mr. Raskin votes no.
Yes, he did. Are there any other members who haven't voted, who haven't been recorded, who wish to be recorded? Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 16 ayes and 25 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in nature of a substitute?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the
Mr.
amendment.
Chairman, I reserve a point of order.
Point of order is reserved.